Hello and welcome to my three-part video series on carbon 60. This is part 3, making your own C60 oil. I'm Elmer, and before I begin, I'd like to let you know that everything I'll be talking about in this video has links in the video description. There's a bunch of links in there. If you want to learn more, you want to buy something, you just want to find out stuff, boom, right there in the video description. Go take a look at those links. All right, let's begin. First thing, making carbon 60 oil, okay? How did the scientists do it? This is a little snippet right out of the rat study on section 2, materials and methods, and it comes down to this. There was only 2 ingredients. There was a Chemlali virgin olive oil from Tunisia, was the olive oil that they used, and the C60 powder was at a purity of 99.98%, and they got it from SES Research. That was it. Their instructions and the method that they used to create their C60 oil was they dissolved the C60 by stirring it into the oil over 2 weeks and doing so in the dark. After that was finished, they centrifuged the oil at 5 Gs for 1 hour, and then after that, then they filtered it through a 25 micron millipore filter. And that was it. That's how they produced the oil that they gave to those rats. Now, when you're thinking about making this at home, obviously, your choices are this. You can either follow to the letter of the rat study so that you can stick to the exact way that they did it, using the exact same oil, using the exact same C60 powder, and doing it exactly like them. Clearly, that's a choice. But there's also another consideration that I wanted to share with you because I found that in my research. What I ran across was this video of an interview that Anthony from C60net did with Fatih Musa, who was one of the scientists in the study. And it's really interesting because in this video interview of the scientist, Tony asks him specifically, is it critical to centrifuge and filter the C60, or can researchers just use the oil? And what was interesting was this is what he said. He said, for scientific reasons, we need to filter it to know the exact dose that we administered because C60 is soluble in oil. But if someone gave it to an animal by himself, it is not necessary to filter it because the C60 crystals will be eliminated and what will be absorbed is only the soluble part. So that is really important when you're thinking about making this at home. The guy is saying that, hey, we had to use centrifuges and filters because we had to make sure, and scientists, that every single batch was exactly like the other batch before it because, it's a scientific study. You can't have variances in what you're administering to the rats. And then when you look at what the commercial producers are doing, they're pretty much following what the rat study did because they also have to produce every single product, every single run has got to be exactly like the last run because consistency in product is the mainstay of doing it right and from a manufacturing standpoint. So right there, one of the scientists is saying, hey, you don't really need to do that if you're not running a study. And so that's a really important little data point, and keep that in mind as we walk through the other considerations of making your own C60 at home. So number 2 is the type of oil. What type of oil are you going to use or are using right now, and how does that work for you? Because if you remember from part 2, all of the different vendors are kind of all over the map. Now, from a standpoint of the majority do use olive oil, they use different olive oils from different places. And you've got some vendors doing coconut and avocado and sunflower and blends. So it's kind of all over the map in terms of what oil is the best oil, and what one are you going to choose? And so the thing to think about when you're looking at the oil or you're choosing the oil you plan on using, you can either stick to exactly what they did, and there's a link below. I actually found a place that sells Chemlali olive oil from Tunisia, believe it or not, $34 for 750 milliliters. By the way, I don't sell it. And or you can go with any other kind of different oil. So here's what you need to think about when you're looking at type of oil. First of all, is it certified? Is it real? Really important. Talked about that earlier. It's so important now that you look to make sure you do your research, Google it, and say, hey, is this product certified? Meaning the third-party lab says that, yeah, this is really real sunflower oil, or this is real olive oil. It's, we certified it in a lab from a third party, and yeah, they're not, it's not a counterfeit, right? And so making sure that it's certified is a big deal. In fact, when I bought some olive oil, there's a link below for a list of olive oil brands that are certified. And so I bought one of those for the dog. Now, there's also the other issue is organic and non-GMO. Obviously, we're doing this for our health, so you want to go with the best oil, the real oil and the best oil that you can get that's for your health, and whether or not it's digestible. A lot of people have different issues with different types of oil. They might not be able to digest it well. And so keep that in mind. And taste is also very important. My dog prefers olive oil. I prefer coconut oil. I'm making both. In your family, maybe everybody hates that, and they just want to, do sunflower oil or peanut oil or, whatever. But the idea, though, is that, taste is an issue. And the last part is the best saturation. So saturation, kind of, you saw from part 2, is kind of a little bit all over the map, too. And so, it's the idea is which one of these oils can hold in the most amount of C60. And right now, based on just what people have claimed, we know that it's a blend. C60, the Champion 60 brand, says that they have 1 milligram per milliliter, and that's the highest. The rat study was 0.8 milligrams per milliliter. So apparently one of these scientists have found a way to hold more. Now the Carbon 60 guy, he just was on Sarah Westall, and he claims that he didn't give the number, did not reply to my email when I asked, but he's claiming in that interview with Sarah Westall that it's, quote, a lot, and that his oil is black to prove it. In terms of how much C60 is actually in the oil. And so that's his claim as to why, I would assume, this is assumption, why his recommended dosage are so low, because he's saying that, my oil has more carbon 60 in it than other oils. So that, and it's real interesting. Good or bad, I'm not judging here, but it's just something to think about. It is a consideration that you need to think about when it comes down to what oil are you going to use. The next consideration is the purity. Now, if you remember, this comes right out of section 2 of the video series, that, not all of the vendors are using none of the vendors are using the same purity level of C60 powder that the rat study did. Rat study was 99.98, and the highest is 99.95 that's out there on the commercial market today, all the way down to the lowest purity level that's for sale, 99.90. And so which one are you going to use? And so what's the difference? Well, solvents. They use solvents. They're toxic. That's how they make the Fullerenes, except for carbon 60. Number 9, they say they don't use solvents. And so, everyone's different apparently. But the idea here is that you want to keep that level down to the absolute lowest. That's why the scientists use 99.98. But if you go shopping, that's expensive. I mean, the better the purity. It's not just a little bit more. It's a lot more from low to medium to high. And so, for me personally, I'm going with the 99.95. These vendors went with 99.5. If you did the math, the difference between those two numbers, 99.95 and 99.99, is only 0.04%. That's it. That's that much more toxins are going to be in that powder as opposed to 99.99. That's 4/100ths. And the fact that C60 is, what does it do? It's a super antioxidant. It removes toxins from your body. So I'm going to assume that that little bit of a difference is going to be easily taken care of by the C60 once I ingest it. And besides, for the last 5 months, I've been taking 99.95 anyway, because these are the vendors I bought from. So I think that's going to be something you need to think about. One more thing to think about, and a lot of it's the economics too. It's a money issue. Next one, number 4, consideration on making your C60 oil at home is, are you going to stir or are you going to shake? There are 2 alternatives. In my research, basically, there's most people are stirring. I did find one vendor that one of the manufacturers is actually using ultrasonic mixers to blend and dissolve their C60 in their oil. So there's different ways of doing it. I've been making vitamin C, or a liposomal vitamin C, for many, many years, and I use a jewelry cleaner, not a commercial one like that, but a smaller one, and that's how that's made. So it's not new to the industry in terms of how to mix a water-soluble powder into a fat. So, it's totally reasonable to use this machine to do so. So you don't just have to stir. You have an alternative if you want to go that way. I plan on doing it both ways to kind of compare the two. So the thing that's most important, though, in this consideration is that, hey, if you stir, it takes 2 weeks. If you stick it in an ultrasonic cleaner, it can be as short as 100 minutes. And where I got that number was I went back to my original vitamin C research, and there's lots of different ways to make liposomal, but mostly there's a case for how long do you leave it in the cleaner, and anywhere from 9 minutes to 100 minutes, right? So I'm going to err on the side of the maximum and say, okay, well, if I can make liposomal vitamin C and I can do so in 100 minutes, then I probably could make lipofullerenes and do the same in 100 minutes using an ultrasonic machine like this. And then there's also the factor of number 5, heating. Do you want to heat the oil? Because, common sense says if you're going to, let's say, take sugar and mix it into tea, that it's going to dissolve a lot better and a lot faster if it's hot tea than iced tea, right? Same thing with C60 in oil. And so when you look at the study, how did they do it in the study? Well, the study just says ambient temperature. And we know from another part in the study that the rats were kept in air conditioning. So, it's a lab. It's an air-conditioned lab. So, it's probably like around 75, 76 degrees in the lab, most likely. And that's what they mixed it at. So they didn't heat it up. So maybe that's why it takes 2 weeks. I'm just guessing. But the idea here is I think that actually heating up the oil will do a better job at dissolving the C60. And you know what? It may actually increase saturation. I don't know. I'm just guessing. These are all things to consider, right? That's why it says considerations and not these are the facts. these are just considerations. So think about heating it. Now, and so I gave you some numbers here to think about. And that is based on the type of oil, they have a different smoke point. And that's where you don't even want to get near smoke point, because if you do your research on oils, you know that the oils themselves become toxic if you heat them up too high, right? So keep them well below the smoke point. And of course, there's issues there with solidity because, specifically coconut oil gets solid at 76. So, one of the good things about these little machines here is that they actually are heaters too, and so you can heat them up. So the ultrasonic cleaner you can turn that thing on and keep it as low as 68 degrees or crank it all the way up to 176 degrees, the oil, so that your mixture is warm or hot while you're basically zapping it with ultra waves to mix up the solution. So that's something to think about. I like the idea of heating, and that'll be definitely part of one of my future experiments. Now, number 6 consideration. Even though Fatih Musa said in the interview with C60.net that it wasn't necessary if you weren't doing a science study to filter in centrifuge, when it comes to filtering, here's something that I was thinking about, was you're taking olive oil or whatever oil, you're putting it on the counter, covering it up with something dark to keep it, keep the light out, and you're going to let that thing run for 2 weeks. And first of all, there's the whole issue of, how sterile is your kitchen or wherever you're working, and is it possible that there's some bacteria floating around that could get inside that when you put the stopper on and let it run. And so there's a consideration, and depending on how concerned you are, you may want to consider, even though Fatih Musa said it wasn't necessary, to go ahead and filter it anyway, because you can easily get a 22 micron filter. I did my research, and it basically comes out, and this is from Inspired Living, that bacteria range in size from 0.2 to 2 microns in width or diameter, and from 1 to 10 microns in length for the non-spherical species. So for a 1 micron filter, right, it will remove most bacteria and cysts. So if you get a 0.22 micron filter, okay, that's way smaller, and you should be able to filter out the majority of anything that's floating around your house. And that's just, an observation. It's a consideration. This is what the contraption looks like. It's a pump. You put your oil up here in a container. The filter's right here in the middle, and then you basically turn this pump on. It's a vacuum. It just sucks the oil out of the top and into the bottom, and that's how it passes through the filter. And you'll actually see that in a video I'll be talking about here in a bit. But that's the idea. It's a consideration. Do you have to? The scientists said no. Do you maybe want to? It's up to you. But for me, I'm definitely going to be filtering my oil. And lastly, how much C60 powder do you put into your oil? Because if you remember from the rat study, how they made it. Now, they made a claim that says, hey, we're going to put 50 milligrams. This is the rat study. 50 milligrams C60 in 10 milliliters of oil. Okay, that's what they said. That was their recipe. And they said that their saturation rate was 0.8. Now, that was a consistent 0.8 because they had to make sure every single batch matched the other batch, right? So now if their saturation was 0.8, that means there was 42 milligrams of C60 stuck to the bottom of the flask, on the sides of the flask, but 42 milligrams stayed behind, and when they poured the oil out, only 0.8 milligrams left the flask that they were stirring in. Well, if you look at the math on this from the dollar numbers, if you're thinking, let's say if it's $100 a gram, and you put 5 grams in there just to get 0.8 out of the oil, you're leaving 42 grams, or for like 4.2 grams in the flask. That's $400. And so I don't, so what I'm saying is like, when you look at like what everybody's doing, I mean, the manufacturers and they're not putting 5 grams per 1,000 milliliters. They're usually putting in 0.8 grams or 1 whole gram per 1,000 milliliters, to make their solution so that they're not throwing the C60 Fullerenes away. And obviously it's very expensive to throw it away. So the formula that I'm going with is if I know that 0.8 is the maximum saturation rate, then I'm only going to put 0.8 grams per liter, 1,000 milliliters, into the solution as where on my starting point. So that's how much I'm going to put in. And that's how much a lot of different folks on the internet are doing, is they're putting in about a gram or 0.8 grams per liter to come out with the saturation rate that was in the study. And so it's definitely a consideration, because it could cost you a whole lot of money if you just blindly follow the study. You will be wasting hundreds of dollars in Fullerenes. Now, let's take a look at the costs. So this is the big the slide everybody wants to know about. What's it cost to do all this stuff? Well, here you go. Bottom line, subtotal $119.33 just for the materials, just for the ingredients. The brand that I buy is Star Extra Virgin Olive Oil. I get it from Safeway. I checked it out. It is certified, so it's only 1 liter. It's $9. And then if I bought C60 Fullerenes and I buy it by the gram, it's $110. Take a peek over here. The research shows that SES sells it for $135. But you can get 1 gram of 99.95 C60 for $110 if you just buy from a different vendor. So it's cheaper. I buy the lower cost amount, and so now it would only cost you and me $119.33 to make 1 liter, 1,000 milliliters batch of C60 oil. Now, of course, you're going to need some equipment to do so. So you need a glass flask and a topper. You need the magnetic stir, and you need a filter kit, which is the filter, the bottle, and the pump. And so all of that together, your subtotal on the equipment is $108.24. So you put out $100 for some equipment, you put $120 out for the ingredients, and boom, you can make yourself your first batch of C60. Now, how does that compare? Well, it's a pretty big number right there, $3.52 an ounce. That's what it's going to cost you. Okay, because at $119.33 per 1,000 milliliters, and there's 33.814 ounces per liter, boom, that's your cost. And that doesn't include the equipment now. It's just the cost of the ingredients. But you could be making your own C60 at home for $3.52 per ounce. And according to my pricing guide, is that a better deal or not? Obviously it is. You can get it a lot cheaper. And if you're going to get seriously into this, you should seriously consider making your own C60 at home. Because the cost could just totally wipe you out. So, and one other thing too, for the accountants out there, according to GAAP accounting principles, any type of capital outlay on equipment is usually depreciated over 36 months. So your overall capital outlay depreciation cost would be $3.01 per month for 36 months. Add that into your formula for making your own, and it's nothing. It's not even enough to even worry about. So let's just stick with $3.52 per ounce as the dollar amount, and don't worry about the $100 to buy your stuff, because you're going to be using it over and over. But what really counts is the ingredients, and that is the number. And there you go. That is the end. So. But I do want to talk about one last thing before I go, and that is there actually are a couple other considerations in my research that I came up with, and one of them is the power source. If you live in an area that is prone to power outages, and you've got that thing stirring for 2 weeks, and if it turns off, it stops, and you forgot about it or whatever, and hey, you don't want to deal with it. So if you have power issues, you might want to get an uninterruptible power supply like you would for your computer, and plug your stirrer into that instead of the wall. Other things are noise levels. This thing's, depending on brands of stirrers, they can get noisy. And I know that the ultrasonic cleaners are quite noisy, and so you don't want this thing, if it's going to be sitting around for 2 weeks, you don't want this thing sitting anywhere that is going to be bugging you because of the noise level. And then of light. Light, as I mentioned earlier, it is so important to keep this thing dark. In fact, after you finish making it, it needs to stay dark. So your storage issues are you need to store it in dark containers. It should be glass. So if you're not already saving your bottles from the manufacturers you're buying from, start saving them because you could reuse those bottles. Or another idea, which is actually a better idea than just getting an amber bottle from a manufacturer, is going and buying yourself a Miron glass bottle. For a 1 liter Miron glass bottle, it's about $14 on Amazon. Very, very cheap. And what Miron is, it's a violet. It's a violet colored bottle. It has special properties in the glass that protects it from UV, and basically it's the best glass you could use to store anything that's sensitive to light. So I actually have Miron bottles in my house in jars to keep things like my sprouting seeds because they're sensitive to light. I've got one that's just dedicated to my ormus so that there's no light that's going to get to that. And I'm actually going to buy some Miron glass bottles to keep my C60 solutions in as well. I've got some leftover bottles from Purple Power that I'll be using as well because I saved my bottles. But it's always good, that this is actually the best way to store it. And you're spending $100 on it. You might want to store it in the right container. And then of course, even if you get it, make sure you keep it dark. So don't just leave it where it's dark. I've actually taken my other bottles and wrapped them in foil. Whatever you do, keep it dark. And the last consideration is if you have cats, and this is really important. If you have cats, that little bastards get in that room with your stir thing, they're going to knock it off the shelf, and that's a guaranteed. I could bet money on it. So watch out for those cats. The little bastards will knock everything off of your counters, and they will definitely mess up your C60. So that's it. That's how to make C60 at home. Now, I'm sorry, one more thing. Right over here, courtesy of Todd Olsen. Below in my video is a video demonstration on everything I just said on how to make C60. So if you want to see how it's done, I'm not going to recreate the wheel. The guy did a fantastic job of making the video. Please go ahead, go below, click on the link, watch his video. The guy's name is Todd Olsen. And this video goes step by step, everything I just said on how to make C60 oil by spinning it around in a magnetic stir. And then you'll be able to visualize what I'm talking about. Great video. Please click on it. And kudos to Todd. Thank you so much for making that video. Saved me a lot of time. So, back to this. Thank you very much. Mahalo. Aloha. This ends the 3-video series. I may do an addendum. I'm not sure. There's a lot of other things that popped in my head as I was doing this. But for right now, thank you. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for stopping by. I'm really glad I could share what I learn with everyone, because I think together we're all going to add to this body of work and this body of knowledge. And together, we're going to all do well in our futures. So, hey, great. Thanks a lot. Aloha. Bye.